Baker's spring update that he always has with you all. He has some opening remarks for you. When we're done with his opening remarks, we'll start our press conference off with Greg Hunter, questions, and then I have a list of you all turned into me. I will call you so we're not talking over everyone. Mr. Baker.
Well, thanks for coming, and as you all know, I try once or twice a year to get together and give a few highlights for our department and answer any questions that are lingering out there as we head into the summer. I think I'll start with this. For our athletic year to date, we've had a ton of really strong accomplishments by our teams. 8 NCAA team qualifiers, 2 conference championships, women's basketball and rifle. Rifle won their 21st national championship. 7 All-Americans, 25 all-conference selections, 10 NCAA individual qualifiers. And as you all know, we're still playing here, and we still have some teams that are we hope continue to notch some accomplishments. So currently we're 4th in the Directors Cup out of the Big 12 teams and 34th nationally. So I think that speaks to the success that our teams are having. Maybe more importantly, or certainly more importantly, in terms of life, academically, we continue to set records and do well. 991 APR matches our all-time highest score. 96% graduation rate, which was the second highest in the Big 12, and I believe that was tied for our highest. Is that correct? And then our department-wide GPA was 3.43, 112 academic All-Americans. I've talked to you all before about how important I think it is for us to bring economic dollars into our city and state and community, and also to promote tourism throughout the state, which I've been a big proponent of, just what a great place this is to come and vacation and spend time. And so we have hosted 3 NCAA regionals already: men's soccer, women's women's basketball, and we're hoping that we add a 4th to that with baseball, but that's to be determined. If we do host 4, that'd be the most we've ever hosted. So that brings a lot of people into this city, brings a lot into the state, fills motel rooms, fills restaurants. So those are all good things for the local economy and the state's economy. Hosted the women's basketball for the first time since '92, so we're very excited about that as well. And if you had a chance, and most of you probably did cover it, incredible environment, and just great for our women's basketball program, but women's basketball in this state. Golden Blue Enterprises, Don Robinson continues to build out a team and to build that organization out. They're doing a lot to help promote NIL and give opportunities to our student athletes to grow commercial revenue. So that continues to be a focus of ours. We're going to actually add to Don's team so that we have more boots on the ground in that area. We announced the addition of premium seating in the Coliseum. I've talked about how, if we're going to grow our revenues, how important that is. And so that project's being done this summer. Fans have asked for those premium experiences, and that's really important. And then you all have seen renderings and some information on the West Press Box Tower project. And that is going very well. We're quietly doing the fundraising for that, but I would just tell you that it has gone extremely well. I'll talk a little bit more about fundraising in general, and I anticipate that there will be updates there over the course of the summer heading into the fall. But if all goes well, that project will be completed and open in time for the 28 football season. If it's not, Rob Alsop's here. You guys can blame him, but we feel pretty good about that. So I think we're doing well, and our facilities team, Rob, our fundraising team, all of those people deserve a lot of credit for how fast that project has moved forward. Lastly, I'll just talk about growing our revenue. So for about a decade, our overall budget was fairly static. It grew some, regressed some during COVID, but it did not grow at the clip that we really need it to. And so this year's budget and next year's budget will both exceed 150 million total. And so that's probably roughly 50% growth from where we were 3 years ago. And so that's taken a lot of people to do that, and a lot of people at home have contributed to that. Our MAC members, right now we're right at 7,000. The all-time high is 8,000. So we're in the middle of a Membership Matters campaign, and we're going to try and eclipse that 8,000 number, and we need your help to do it from the people at home. So get your neighbor, get your friend, get the person that's by you at church or at your kids' games this summer to join the MAC. That's really important. All time prior to this year, we had 4 gifts of $5 million or more. We already have 3 inside this fiscal year, with I think 4 more that are verbal that we're trying to get across the finish line. So 2009 prior to this year was our best fundraising year ever. I think our second best was 2 years ago. And we will surpass that this year. It's just a matter of how much. But I think this is going to by far and away be our best fundraising year ever. So we're very thankful and very excited about that. There are challenges ahead, as you all read, and you know. I sat here a year ago and was very hopeful that we had a system coming that had guardrails and regulations that we could plan for, and that has not really materialized. We're still in an environment where the resources need to compete from a roster standpoint change in real time. Many times I start the day off with, whether it's Rob or Don or Ben, talking through where we need to be, where we're trying to go, and that number only goes one direction. So that's not a problem that's just West Virginia specific. That's nationally. Everybody is struggling to kind of stay where they need to. But we have been able to find a way to better position ourselves each of the last 3 or 4 years. And I think going into this year, we feel the best we've ever felt in terms of the resources and where our teams rank inside the Big 12. And so we're excited to see that play out on the field and on the court and all those things. And then I'll just say this, very, very blessed to have a board of governors, a chair in Rusty Hudson, who are very committed to athletics, very supportive, a great fan base who wants what's best for WVU, and a tremendous president. Mike Benson's been a great partner, great asset, and really has been a blessing. I did see where he attended all 9 commencements. I've been doing this 20 years, and most of the time they divide and conquer those commencements. So I believe he shook well over 3,000 hands, so I hope his immune system was strong going into that exercise. But Mike's a worker, and he's been a great asset for us, and we're very thankful to have him here at WVU. And then I'll just close by saying we just finished our caravan tour, and a lot of people have stopped doing those. It does take a lot of time, and the coaches' calendars and schedules have become so crowded because of just the way that recruiting works and the way that rosters are turning over. But we think it's still really important, and that gets validated when we go out on the road. There's always great attendance, great enthusiasm, and really you pick up a lot of energy as you go out and see people and see how excited they are for the Mountaineers. So with that, we'll open for questions.
So Wren, go back to some of the national questions that you talked about. It's sort of when you talk to your colleagues, what's it like? Because it was supposed to have guardrails, as you said, but it seems like those are ignored, and the numbers just seemingly grow at an exponential rate. So what do you guys talk about? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, a lot of frustration. And most people that are in the trenches understand that it's not sustainable. And so I see people sometimes write stories about a market that will regulate itself, and I don't think they fully understand college athletics, where there's not real ownership. It's a bureaucratic organization. Most of the institutions are state institutions, but there's not an owner, nor is there dividends or a board of directors who who are making sure that you're giving the shareholders their value, so to speak. But what we do have is a ton of influencers. Everybody cares, and you all know it because you cover this team in this state. There are no pro teams. We are the state's pro team, and so there's huge pressure to find a way to make sure that your teams have what they need to compete, and that doesn't always lead to sound and prudent financial decisions. And once one person does something, then it becomes a cascading domino effect of pressure on everybody else to try to match that. And so you're starting to see people have to make some really hard decisions, cutting sports, the quality of the experience, even if you didn't cut the sports, what kind of experience are those student athletes getting? The investment that is required from the central institution, from campus proper, into athletics, and where does that money come from? How is that money accounted for? And so it is frustrating. I believe at some point there will be a system put in place that's more sustainable. It's just how much collateral damage has to happen before we get there. But inside the walls of our department, we really try to take an approach of being positive and understanding that we don't get to determine how the world is when it comes to athletics. We just have to operate and be our best. And it's not always, comparison is the thief of joy. It's not always school A has this, so we have to have this. It is, what are our goals, what are our priorities, and how can we be the best version of ourselves? But yeah, Greg, it's frustrating, especially a year ago you thought you were on the path of having a system. And you really have two issues, and we wrestle with both of them all the time. How do you get the money? And then you got to get the money in the hands of the student athletes in a way that's going to pass through CSC and those things. And so we spend a lot of time trying to do it right here. Huge credit to our staff that spends a lot of time doing that. And the hope is that at some point we can all come together and agree on a system that is fair for everybody.
Are you currently in favor of or against the SCORE Act as you understand it currently exists?
I'm supportive of the SCORE Act, supportive of what I know of the Senate bill that's being talked about. I'm supportive of anything that defines the rules of engagement in a way that everybody understands and must adhere to. And so I've always, from the day I took this job, I've talked about, I think there should have been more benefit to student athletes, especially those in the revenue sports. But you cannot have a totally open system with kind of unrestricted free agency at all times, more or less, and think that that's going to be sustainable in a higher education setting.
Follow up. Whatever the legislation is, SCORE Act, CSC, NCAA replacement, whatever, can any of these exist or succeed without an ironclad buy-in from all the schools that say they're going to operate under it?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great question. I was a middle school principal for a year. I was at 26 years old, I was the youngest principal I believe in state history in Oklahoma. I was the athletic director for the entire school at my alma mater, a K-12 school. Probably K-12 had around 1,000 students. but I was principal of the middle school, and what my takeaway was is everybody loves discipline until it's their child, and I feel like we're that way in college athletics. Everybody wants rules and a system and enforcement for everybody but themselves. And I actually said this on one of our AD calls the other day. It just feels like we're all sitting at a giant table playing poker, and as long as somebody's sitting there thinking they may have the best hand, they're just going to keep up in the ante and trying to force other people out of the game. And so it's how long do you want to stay? Do you want to stay in? So I do think some type of federal help is probably your best bet. If not that, it's riddled with pitfalls, but maybe employment has to be vetted out and explored in a more meaningful way. But I saw a story yesterday that there might be some, and I think it's a minority, but inside the SEC and Big Ten that are talking about should we break away. I mean, there's no evidence that would fix anything. We come up with the Autonomy 4 to get the ability to do legislation in the NCAA without everybody's involvement. That didn't solve it. This settlement, while the court decided certain aspects of it, the autonomy conferences and really the Big Ten and SEC led the way, and their in-house counsel and outside counsel set a lot of those rules of engagement, and we're not even a year into it. And so I just don't know that whatever that breakaway is, if there's not a commitment from whatever segment of schools it would be to actually abide by the rules, I don't know how that really fixes any of the ails that we're experiencing. So, I think people are a little bit at a loss for the best way to rein it in, but I think federal legislation is probably your best bet. That'd be my guess.
Okay. Wren, it's funny you mentioned the tourism money being brought in. I was listening to last year's talk, and you mentioned that too, and how important it was. And I was wondering how you weigh that against neutral field games, as far as, rather than having a home game and bringing that in, is it just purely dollars and TV, or is it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all factors. It is, we always look at when we get a neutral site opportunity, there's a baseline number of games we expect to play in Morgantown, and are we hitting that? So I would say it's pretty non-negotiable that we've always won at least 6 games here in Morgantown for football, for instance. We'd really like to have 7. But if you're given an opportunity to play the right opponent, and the financials make sense, and it's in a place where you're trying to engage donors and alums. So, we've made an emphasis, the Charlotte area, for instance, that's always a place where we do really well. And so that's a place where, we really have tried to plant a flag in terms of being there. I think you want to do what's right by the state and community, but certain neutral site games give you an opportunity to draw revenue, to hit a broader audience, to play an opponent that maybe doesn't have the opportunities in their schedule to do 2 games, and so you're doing 1. And then, I think the other aspect that plays into that now is the NIL opportunities. Some of those games present an NIL opportunity for the athletes on your roster, and as you're trying to grow that above cap revenue, that's part of the conversation as well. And then just lastly, when you look at things like net scores and RPIs and all of those metric systems, some of those neutral site games are a good compromise, especially in basketball, because you don't get hit as hard in a negative way if you lose it at home as you do and then conversely, if you win a neutral game, it's worth more than winning a game at home. So it just, you kind of mitigate the loss a little bit, and you inflate the win by playing it at a neutral site. So a lot of times when you throw that into the equation, it just becomes overall weighing those factors, the best decision.
Yeah, here in the front, Keenan.
Wren, any update on any potential more naming rights, particularly Mountaineer Field or any other arenas?
I would just say that no imminent update on that, but we continue to explore every opportunity to bring in revenues. So, whether that's sponsor patches, whether that's naming of facilities, certainly continuing to try to raise money the traditional way. All of those opportunities to grow revenue, we stay focused on. But, I think I've been honest that I believe, given our presence in the state, that when we do a deal like that, it needs to be the right partner that has the right values, that we collectively can agree on how we want our brands branded and commingled. And so we're exploring all of that in an effort to grow revenue.
Spencer.
Wren, what do you think of NCAA basketball tournament expanding, and then potential college football 2014 playoff, and the removal of the Big 12 championship and title games?
So I think most of you know that I coached basketball early on. I got my start into the industry on the basketball side, so love college basketball. I think the NCAA tournament's the most special thing that we have. It captivates the entire nation. I would say I want to see how the expansion actually works and affects the tournament and evaluate it. I would hope that we're all willing to evaluate it after a year or two and see the impact. But, what you had is, as things have changed and rosters are more transient and power conference teams have more resources, there's more talent being aggregated in those power conferences. As somebody who's worked at virtually every level of college athletics, I would not be in favor of pulling AQs away from the mid-major leagues. I think that's part of what makes the tournament special, because everybody that goes to the conference tournament goes with the hope that they can catch lightning in a bottle, be Cinderella, and play in the big dance. And the fact that you have everybody kind of represented and engaged, I know not everybody takes every team to the conference tournament, but most people take the majority of their teams. I just think that's a special part of it, and that every Division I student athlete should start the basketball season with the hope that they could play in the big dance. But I think there were conversations around, are those the best teams, especially as the talent is congregating more to the higher resourced leagues. And so I think this was a compromise. Let's expand the field. Everybody keeps their AQs. It's undetermined who those additional at-larges will go to, but you guys have probably seen the studies. The vast majority of them end up going to power conference teams. And so I think the expansion was done in an effort to try to appease all sides of that equation, and let's just see how it works and how it's evaluated. But generally, I'm in favor of opportunities for young people, and so you add more teams, you give more young people opportunities.
And does that go the same for the college football playoff?
Yeah, college football playoff I think is a little different because there's right now that's a relatively small field, and so I do think it needs to be enlarged just for representation generally. I think there are teams being left out who could win games and perhaps advance to the championship. What the right number is, I don't know that I'm sure. I think I'd want to see how are we going to divvy up the additional revenue, and how does that selection process work. But I would say generally I'm in favor of expansion. And if the number is 16, if the number is 24, I don't know that I'm dug in on a certain number. I also think the opportunities to host those games on campuses. I was, as I mentioned earlier, the environment for the women's basketball regional was electric. I mean, absolutely electric. Just a buzz from well before the game ever started. I was thinking, man, can you imagine what it would be like hosting a college football playoff game here in Morgantown? I think those opportunities for campuses, there's something special about the pageantry of having those events on campus. So I think giving more people those opportunities is a good thing. But, you have to take the calendar into account, the wear and tear on players' bodies, what's going to happen to championship games, when do you start the season, when do you conclude, portals. There's so many other things to be worked out in there. So that's why I leave a little bit of wiggle room to say I'd like to know more of the details as we get there, but definitely favor expansion.
John?
About the West Tower, and obviously is there the excitement of the silent campaign and the fundraising part, and then there's 28 when you're going to be in it. What about the transition between? How much have you guys got into that? Have you looked at Penn State, what they did? What have you done as far as that goes?
Yeah, so April Messerly, who's over our facilities team, and she works very closely with Rob, and then they work closely with our architects and other outside consultants. But they are looking at that and exploring those options. Early on, there are some temporary structures that could be erected that could, have certain parts of the game day in there, because we would start potentially the demolition after this upcoming football season. If it opens in 28, that leaves 27. And I think we would look at where can we build some temporary suites in the stadium so that people are not displaced totally, and that, to be completely candid, it allows us to keep the revenue, not go a year without revenue. We're trying to do that in a way where, hey, let's also do a test run for maybe future additional premium seating. So if this goes well and people like it, we may add that as a permanent element later. So exploring a lot of those. Not quite there yet in terms of what that looks like and where we'd put all those structures, but definitely plan to do some temporary accommodations for some of our best donors and business supporters.
Cody,
yeah, Wren, just your thoughts on the private equity deal Commissioner Yormark signed and the line of credit that's been offered to the schools?
Yeah, so there's really kind of three parts to that deal. One was the conference got an investment of capital to take on new revenue generating opportunities. So by way of example, the commissioner has explored virtual signage on some of the broadcasts. So you all that watch a lot of pro sports know they come down and there's an advertisement on the court or on the pitch, and then they go back and it's a different advertisement. Well, that's not a real advertisement. That's just planted there through technology on the TV. It's virtual, and so could that be something that we do? But the investment in that costs quite a bit. So you're either asking us to take dilution or take that off of our distribution, or at a time when we're desperate for resources. So I think those are the kind of things that he will explore. The second phase of that really incentivizes Redbird, who has their hands in a lot of different entities in and around sports in general, but also businesses, to help us find additional partners, whether that's major sponsors at the league level, and so they have some skin in that game. The third part was the line of capital available to institutions. And listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with optionality. It's always good to have that. We don't plan to exercise that at this time, primarily because if we were to need capital for a project like the West Tower project, we could get that at a more affordable interest rate. And if we are taking that out to cash flow annual expenses because we're upside down, it's really kind of like a payday loan. We're going to have to start paying that loan back, and if you don't have a clear line of sight on additional revenue, you're just making the pain hurt worse on down the road. So, but again, it is good to have optionality, and I commend our commissioner for always, like, there's not one day where he's not thinking about some new thing to try to do or introduce, and so I think that's a good thing for the league.
Front here, Mike Austin.
So, obviously, as you mentioned in your open, the Olympic sports, the non-revenue sports, are experiencing some of their greatest success in history, and ironically, it is happening during a period that the football, men's basketball teams are not. Going into now year 2 with Rich Rodriguez and now year 2 with Ross Hodge, and experiencing a different level of success for both, what do you now need to see actually produced on the court, on the field? Win-loss record has to eventually matter to make it where you feel the increased investment that Rich Rod's been open, that he had more money to play with this past year, which our recruiting was better than when he first got there, to make all that worthwhile. Because there has to be a point, I'd imagine, that if you're doing all this legwork to invest more, you can't go 4-8 again and say that it's because of whatever reason.
So I'll take that as kind of two questions and give two separate and distinct answers, although I recognize they're probably can be commingled a little bit. The first one, we're having success in a lot of our sports that are not the big revenue producers. And I think what you're getting at is that coming at the expense of the two revenue producing sports, or should some of those resources be diverted to those two? And I think it's a compelling and interesting question. Yeah. I mean, we have to make those evaluations every day, and we have those discussions. I believe that we don't have to pick or choose that. And if you look at, so here's the approach that we've taken with those Olympic sports. We went to campus and we said, hey, we are your biggest customer in terms of a single payer by far. We pay a significant tuition bill. We are in a state, population-wise, that's smaller, and therefore produces less blue-chip talent than a lot of other states. And so when I was at the University of North Texas, somewhere between 80 to 90% of our roster every year was in-state. And so here that is flipped, okay? And so that out-of-state bill is really high. And so, and campus agreed, I think President Benson, our board, the vice presidents agreed that that's a challenge for us, and that we still care and value all of our sports offerings. And so we basically said, hey, we'll get in-state rate for our athlete population, and we took the savings from that to add scholarships. One of the reasons I felt like that was so important was we only have a certain number of people in terms of MAC employees and that GB employees, and so we need their time and attention focused when it comes to above cap revenue or NIL opportunities on those two revenue sports, because it's hard. This is a model that doesn't work if those sports continue to not be where you need them to be. And so that was in an effort to kind of be able to clear up to MAC and GBE, here's your priority for the above the cap NIL, and yet to tell our other sports, we are giving you a ton of new scholarships. A couple of them got more than double their scholarship allocation, okay? And so it's a game changer for them. I've told you all before, we do give all of the revenue producing sports some amount of revenue share. So if it's a ticketed sport and they're selling tickets, they get kind of a corresponding percentage back. So they have a little bit of money to play with there. But most of our revenue share is going to football, men's basketball, and then baseball and women's basketball get some as well. And then most of our NIL above the cap efforts go to those four sports, with a heavy emphasis on the top two. So that's the approach that we're taking. I've not gotten to a point to where I think we have to choose to downgrade or tier those other sports to be successful in the top two. I think, the last 2 to 3 years where we haven't achieved what we would like to in football and basketball is more of an issue with just transition. And every time you transition head coaches in football or men's basketball, you are going to completely flip that roster, and we've seen that. Then you bring people in, they miss the high school recruiting cycle entirely. They're having to get everybody from the portal. The price in the portal, especially the later you go, the lesser the return is, I would say. And so you put yourself in a little bit of an issue. Coach Rodriguez, much to his credit, kind of banked a little bit of his money last year to put with this year's money. And so that helped him, in terms of his recruiting class, because I think he got to a point where he could see we're spending money on value that's not proven. And if that's the case, I'd rather wait till we've had a full year to evaluate and be ready. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken. We know that we've got to continue to grow our resources, but I think across the board, for maybe the first time in a long time, I feel confident that when you aggregate all the resources that we're top half of the league, and we have not been there in a long, long time. There's probably certain things, and some of it from a roster standpoint is harder to determine because the numbers that you see get inflated. I see numbers that are reported on us, and I'm like, yeah, that's not accurate. And so I know those numbers are inflated just because I see our numbers inflated. But I do think we're in the best position we've been in a long time. Unfortunately, you're chasing people who are chasing people, so the race is just always on. In terms of expectations, I've always said I'll never put on any coach a number of wins. To me, it's about are we building a culture? Are we building a foundation? Do we have momentum? And do I feel good about the direction? And I do in both football and men's basketball. And I'm excited. I can't wait for the fall to get here, although I could use a little bit of downtime to prepare and plan and all those kind of things that we do in the summer. But I'm very excited and bullish on the future of both of those. They both have their highest rated recruiting classes, portal and high school, in many, many years. And I think that is probably you could contribute that to both better resources, but also more time and a refined process, for them to spend a year getting ready.
Mike Gonzalez.
Too, Wren, they're kind of different.
We got any fights coming up, Mike?
Too scared.
How much money could we make you and I in some kind of?
Solve a lot of your problems.
Yeah.
Wouldn't last very long.
I'm not going to stand back and just strike. I'm ground and pound. I'm coming after you. So.
You serious?
Yeah.
Okay. You asked for this, right?
Right.
Your talk about the stadium being ready in 28, and you mentioned some of the things that 27 could be different. Is capacity different? Probably a little bit lower. I'm speaking like football because it sounds like basketball will be done in time for next season. Capacity different, and then if you have fewer seats, the demand is higher. I'm imagining because of that, and then the fact you have to pay some bills, you could increase ticket prices. Are those options on the table, off the table, or would you rather not touch those prices right now?
Yeah, so I would say we explored and have looked at a variety of things with football since we're doing this new premium pricing, reseating, all of that, and we really feel like there's probably the primary value is to be had in the new premium inventory, and it doesn't behoove us to go do a lot of change out in the stadium other than the part that has to be changed, but because of the project. So we're bringing some club seats, down in front of the new towers, if you've seen the rendering. So that's going to require some changing, but I'm looking at Rob. I know we lose a little capacity, but it's minimal. Do you remember the number? It's a few hundred? Yeah. Few hundred. Yeah, so like it's not really that much of a change capacity-wise. But when you put the chairback seating in instead of bleachers in a section, that changes it. But I would say it's a little bit to be determined. We're still looking through that, and we've got people that help us with the analytics and the analysis of that. But I don't anticipate any major changes. And if you've paid attention, even when we have adjusted prices, generally, I will always go down on our most affordable tickets. And so, like, basketball, we saw a price decrease for the cheaper seats in men's basketball, and part of that was when we did the analysis, we were pretty high on the low end. We weren't where we need to be on the upper end relative to peers, but on the lower end. And I think our best asset, and it goes back to why we continue to do caravans, our best asset is the market share. Everybody in this state cares. And so we're very, very careful and intentional to not do something to deteriorate our market share. And that means having tickets that Joe Blow, West Virginian, can afford. So we really try to keep that affordability there, not for the best seats, not for the premium. We can't do that and compete. But that get-in point, we try to keep as affordable as we can. And I'll tell you a place where that's a conversation that we have a lot is baseball. I mean, we're sold out there, and occasionally somebody will say, you went up 20%. And I'm like, well, for that seat, we could have doubled it and sold them all. But we have conversations around how can we be fair to dedicated and passionate West Virginian fans that are going to be here come rain or snow. And we occasionally play some baseball games in the snow. So those are conversations that we have. And so that will be very intentional with football to not make changes that we don't need to make. And I think right now, most of our emphasis when we're doing the revenue calculations is just on the new premium.
Okay. And then the market correction or spending conscious, whatever you want to call it, for players, that hard cap doesn't grow, but the amount of money players are getting does every year. And I don't know the top 5, 10, 25 players in any sport is better one year than the other, but they're getting paid way more too. Is that the part that, like, collectively people have to say we won't continue to pay way more for essentially the same quality player?
If they want to run a business that makes sense without running deficits and putting a tax on campus, people will have to do that. I just have not seen any evidence of that yet. It just continues to go up, and I think people are borrowing from themselves and moving revenues to different fiscal and expenses to different fiscal years, playing a financial shell game just to survive the day. We have tried to be very disciplined in our approach here. I understand that our coaches need more resources. We have sports where if you went back 3 or 4 years ago, we may be up 100% in some of those budgets and expenses. But if you go to those coaches, I always tell people, if you give a coach a list and say, I want you to write everything that you want on this list, and they give it to you and you say, okay, I'm going to make all this happen. A week later, they could make out a new list. It's just the way that coaches are built. They're always looking to do the next thing. So you do administratively, you have to be disciplined in your approach. But, you just think about this. Forever, really only 2 sports have been profitable, football and men's basketball. I would wager a decent amount that when you factor in the roster spend, there are less than 15 or 20 profitable men's basketball programs in the country right now. Just in a year or two, we have flipped that to where I would bet you there's less than 2 dozen profitable men's basketball programs when you take roster spend into account. Could be considerably less than that. I don't know what would make us think that we wouldn't do the same thing in football. There's just not, I've not seen any market conditions or discipline yet that from the industry as a whole that would show that.
Nick?
Wren, not officially official yet, but it looks like there's a lot of momentum to move men's soccer to 2 semesters. Your thoughts on a 2-semester model for men's soccer, and does it change West Virginia's ability to compete in the sport?
I think generally I'm positive about it, and that mainly comes because when I've talked to Dan, he's positive about it. And so I think in leadership, one of the things that you try to do is recognize where you're not the expert. And so when it comes to the calendar of what's best for men's soccer, I am not the expert. There are conversations to be had for how does that adjust the load that's on our, we run one of the leanest athletic departments in terms of full-time employees in the Big 12. And certainly our facilities area, we run them ragged over the course of the year in our game operations people. So I think that's more of where I spend my time, like, hey, can we make this work? Can we distribute this load? And I think we can. Dan's been pretty favorable of he thinks it would be good for the game, good for growing the game to split the season.
We have time for a couple more questions. Just raise your hand here and I'll let you know. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. I find it kind of incongruous in an atmosphere where everything is revenue, that, like 80% of your sports are non-revenue. How can you keep that? How can you capitalize on the ones that, like baseball and women's basketball, who are successful? How can you capitalize revenue-wise on that? And how do you keep from the others becoming club sports?
Yeah, I think it's a big question that everybody's having to wrestle, and we're wrestling as an industry. So when you talk about revenue, a lot of our sports produce revenue. There's only 2 that are profitable, right? And the rest of them, it's just how much money are we willing to lose when we pencil it. The last 2 or 3 years we've really tried, if we're gonna increase expenses, to say, can we pencil the revenues, whether that's through a ticket price increase or additional tickets sold. So like women's basketball, their season ticket numbers have grown exponentially. They certainly have doubled the last 3 or 4 years, maybe more than that. Matt Wells would know for sure. So we're growing revenue. We've also grown expenses there. Same with baseball. That number, they're probably up somewhere between 50 and 75% in terms of how much ticket sales revenue, but we've outpaced that with expenses. So I think for us, it is capturing revenue where we can, understanding that expense line is most likely going to grow, especially with success. So where can you bring in revenue? So like last year, we started doing season tickets in volleyball and soccer, and that was in an effort to try and grow some revenue in those sports. But Bob, the question that you ended with there is, and I saw Bubba Cunningham had a quote on this not too long ago. He worries, we only have 18 sports. I think North Carolina has close to 30, certainly in the upper 20s. And with only 2 of those really being profitable, at what point do those become more almost like club sports or youth sports, where their parents are actually paying for their kids to play those sports? I hope that we can avoid that. But I do think if we keep going down the path we're on, those are all questions that people are going to have to wrestle on their individual campuses.
Plus helped at all as far as that? I mean, do you get anything out of that as far as you with them on every game?
Yeah. ESPN, so far, I think everybody's TV packages are all combined and not bifurcated. Commissioner Yormark's talked some about wanting to split off basketball perhaps and bid that separately and thinking there might be more value. So I think the viewership overall contributes to that ESPN number, and I'm sure they have a calculation for it. But when it comes to TV revenue, the vast majority of that revenue is coming in around football, men's basketball, a little bit women's basketball, but it's mainly those two sports.
We'll go back to Kevin.
Understanding the revenue generation has to basically pay for or be a product or be a profit for facilities enhancements. What is the baseline that you've got to improve by? So say if an improvement in baseball would cost $1 million to put in revenue generating seats or whatever, what kind of level of revenue do you have to be in before you say, okay, yes, we can seriously consider this?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say is generally if a project is not revenue producing, we're not tracking on it very much right now. So let's start there. I think there's one exception to that, and that is the apron around the Coliseum, which I believe is one of the greatest eyesores that I don't think those of us who live it every day recognize it maybe like a visitor does, but I remember the first time I walked up to that building, I was like, oh man, and it's gotten way worse since then. It's crumbling, it's deteriorating, it was hideous to begin with. So we have a couple of donors who are exploring with us fixing that. That's a project that I feel pretty passionately about. I just think it's a bad representation for us and for our state. So like basketball, I believe we thought that would be around $1.5 million. It may come in a little under that, but it was going to generate somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 annually. So 5-year payback made sense. I think something gets longer than 10, you probably start to really think about, is this a project that is worth it? But it all depends on the donor commitments around the project. So, the football project is like a $150 million project. We think we can raise the vast majority of it, if not all, through donations. It'll generate in excess of $6 million annually for a budget. But if you're looking at a payback, that would take longer. However, people aren't giving you that money. If they just wanted to go into some interest-bearing account, they could do that. They're doing that because they're wanting to buy the premium and they're wanting to see this project become a reality. And so I think each project is different. You evaluate it different, but you're just trying to stack. One of the things that Don Robinson's been really good about, because he had a different background and skill set than the rest of our team, is not everything has to be a triple or a home run. Like if you can just hit singles repeatedly, those things add up too. And so I think we're looking at that a little differently and trying to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to generate revenue everywhere that we can.
Over the last year, do you feel that your approach, because you mentioned your frustration early on, has your approach with just keeping WVU nationally relevant changed within a year after everything that has occurred within the last 365 days?
No, I think my approach is the same, and I certainly, if I seem to be negative early, that's not my disposition. I think our staff would tell you I generally come to the table with optimism and a desire to attack the challenges, whatever they may be. I think some of my earlier comments were more about the realistic picture that we're dealing with, and that a year ago we thought that there was a system coming, and that has not really quite materialized like we had hoped. I haven't given up hope yet, but I think my approach is always the same. This program means too much to this institution. It means too much to the state. It means too much to West Virginians for us to not be the best version of ourselves that we can be, and to not try and make sure that we're putting our teams and our coaches in a position to be competitive. And so we're going to come in every day and try and find new ways to do that, and we're going to do it with an energy and a positive viewpoint that it can be done. And listen, you look at our Olympic sports, the last 2 to 3 years is probably the best period in history. And I go back to Mike's question earlier. I think football and basketball are on their way too when you look at what they're doing from a recruiting standpoint. We just have had a lot of transition in those programs that you know, they're arriving at the depot at a different time, but I have confidence that they're coming. The train is coming.
Last two questions. We'll do it, Mike, and then Greg Hunter will finish it up.
So the other end of all this change, in addition to money and NIL, is the transfer portal, and even its existence and being a giant change. Was a little different this past year, not having a second window in football, which had been open, with that being a nice advantage to them now. But where do you stand on the debate of if athletes should literally sign contracts that then they would have to themselves pay a buyout if they would leave before that contract is up, just like a coach would have to do, that Rich had to do before, and that'll, like, all of that if coaches are held to that standard, even though some in the public would think it's easier on a coach, if now players are making to that level of money, where do you stand on if contracts should be upheld, if they should have to pay a buyout if they would leave before the contract is up, and does that walk us down a slippery slope of if they are then becoming full-time employees, do they need health care, etc.? Because that's the other end of it that gets brought up.
Like, listen, if things are going to be unregulated, they should be unregulated. There shouldn't be just be protections on one end of that. And so we do stagger most of our contracts in a certain way where we've got some protections. You know, if there's we don't do a ton of multi-year contracts, have a handful, but those have, I think, some protections in there for both sides. So I mean, right now it's a totally unregulated, unrestricted, you know, and so I think you owe it to yourself to try to get protections where you can. These can't just be all one-sided agreements, and so
Not getting back. It's not out to the public where the coach number is out there.
That's right. And part of that is, you know, the whole FERPA conversation, and you know, and listen, I've been honest, we've tried to protect our contracts here and have been successful doing that. But I think everything is on the table in the environment that we're in. And we try to be fair to our student athletes. There are certain things that we have discussions about and maybe we work through and give on. There's certain things that we don't.
What's this out, Greg?
So in terms of revenue generation, you and ADs before you have talked about bringing in revenue through concerts or a variety of outside things. To this point, nothing major has really happened. Any closer? What are your thoughts about that?
So the Jake Owen concert at spring game, so we're trying to accomplish 2 or 3 things with that. One is our season ticket renewals. Renewals for football are doing very well. We have not seen as many new. Now, that's to be expected. Last year we had a new football coach. We had backyard brawl that was highly anticipated. So and so a little bit of that was, let's try and generate some excitement and enthusiasm at spring game. And while the ticket was free, you had to register to collect it. And we had it was in the thousands of new contacts and emails that and I believe we asked people would they like to see information on season ticket prices in there, and almost all of them said yes. And so, but the other thing we were trying to accomplish before we have a full concert where we charge is let's have a concert, and we've got some things we have to kind of work through, like how many people can be on the field given the exits and ramps and stairwells and all that stuff. And you know, I've talked before about both of our venues have some challenges in terms of loading and unloading staging material. And so we're looking at and likely will either along with this stadium project or separate from but running at the same time work on at least one of our tunnels where we can get semi trucks all the way to the field and not have to forklift crate by crate and take days and days to get everything on the field. And so we are designing and retrofitting our facilities in a way to host those venues. It could be a little bit just because of the way that booking works. So those things usually work a full year, if not 18 months in advance. And so, knowing that 28 is when we'd be reopened, I think we're looking at some bigger shows for then in the stadium. May do something in the Coliseum before then. The Coliseum has some challenges too, but we're having both facilities audited by people who know better than we do what is required to have a big event. And then once we have all that back, that'll allow us to do that. But we definitely are meeting with the promoters, and we're looking specifically when you talk about athletic venues, every promotion is different. So we're close to Pittsburgh. Most shows are going to stop there. Some will skip down and go to Charleston. But is there a place in there for us to host shows? We think so, but we're also talking to the experts to figure that out. Maybe you're doing a bigger show in an off year when they're not doing their tour. I've actually talked to Charles Wesley a little bit about that. You could catch a big show in a year where they're not touring, so they're not going to hit Pittsburgh, and you don't duplicate the same audience that you're trying to sell tickets to and that kind of stuff. So I think we're looking at a variety of things. I think the short answer to that is yes, you will see more of those kinds of events. We have some work to do that.
Okay, 60 minutes later, you covered a lot of information.
I didn't even have to open this energy drink yet. So just want to say thank you for everything you guys do all year long, even though not every story do you run by me and let me approve it for positivity about decisions that we may make. I do appreciate the level at which you cover our teams and our programs, and I hope you have a great summer. And until next time, happy trails. Let's go Mountaineers.